Good morning. If you would like to all come a little closer, maybe. I feel like you're all so far back. So welcome to our Veteran Salute. My name is Tammy Boylan, and I am the chair of the committee who planned today's festivities. So at this time, I would like to thank the MASH Brass Ensemble for playing for us this morning and introduce Active Aging's Executive Director, Chris Gear, who's going to be giving our welcome.
Good morning. I'm really happy to see all of you here this morning, so thank you for joining us. We're honored to have you here to celebrate some part of your day with us. On this day every year, Americans across our country take a little extra time to express their gratitude to our veterans. This one day. I just don't quite think that one day cuts it. While I admittedly have no concept of the experiences of a veteran, I can understand that your commitment is decidedly worth more of our gratitude every day of the year. I've never left my family for long periods of time, missed birthdays and anniversaries, or put my life on the line for another. I've never eaten an MRE or tried to sleep while wondering if my enemy was waiting for me to let my guard down. I've never sent a husband, a daughter, or a son off to defend our country. In fact, I don't think this is working, like many others, live most days blissfully unaware under a blanket of protection that I can neither see nor feel. A blanket of protection woven by every veteran from the beginning of our country until today, through their blood, through their sweat, through their tears and sacrifice. A sacrifice that far exceeds one day every year. As you all go through the next 364 days between today and next November 11th, I hope you know and feel the appreciation you have so rightly earned. I hope you're able to enjoy and experience fully the freedoms that you have fought to provide for us all. And I hope that the rest of us endeavor to do better, to appreciate you more, to honor you more, and to give back in whatever ways we can. Thank you for your service and for every sacrifice you have made for all of us. Thank you. I'd like to introduce our host and our sponsors for today. Vantage. This is Susan Santiago, and she is the Vice President of Operations. Susan?
Thank you. All right, so microphone? No microphone. Okay, well, I am just going to speak very loud. I should be able to do that. Good morning, everybody. It's very nice to see you today. And thank you for letting Vantage be part of your day. On the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month, the fighting of World War I ended in 1918. Due to the conclusion of the war to end all wars, November 18th became a universally recognized day of celebration. The day was originally declared Armistice Day 8 years after the end of World War I and honored only veterans of that war. Then in 1954, after World War II and the Korean War, it was renamed Veterans to honor all veterans who served America in war and defended democracy. So today, we honor all of our veterans who unselfishly placed their lives on the line for our freedom. Those men and women were ordinary people until they heard the call of duty and answered it. They left their families, their homes, and their lives, not for recognition or fame, and even the honor we bestow upon them today. They fought to protect our country, to maintain our way of life. The war on terrorism has helped us realize how truly unique the American way of life is. The freedom we enjoy is extremely special, and that is why we must defend it. Right now, as we gather here today, thousands of soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guard men are on the job around the world protecting America. As we honor our veterans and remember their great deeds, let us also salute those who are currently fighting for our freedom. So now is the time to not only honor those who have fought and are fighting for our freedom, it is also time for each of us to find someone in our lives that is a veteran and hear their story and simply say thank you. Veterans Day is not only a day for veterans, but a day for all Americans. It is a day to remember why we were fighting, and a day for all of us to begin our journey of protecting our freedom and the freedom of future generations. To all the veterans here today, we sincerely thank you for your service and your sacrifices. And to all, thank you for honoring our veterans today and showing your support of our heroes, past and present. Let us walk toward tomorrow, still honoring them by living and appreciating the freedom they protected. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a very wonderful day.
At this time, I would like to welcome Reverend Brian Jensen, who's going to give our invocation.
That's right. Please bow with me in prayer. Eternal and everlasting God, we ask that you allow each and every veteran of our nation's armed forces to feel truly and appropriately honored by the attention and appreciation of their fellow citizens this day. Let no one feel forgotten or neglected. Let every man and woman, young and not so young, feel the deep and enduring gratitude of our nation and its inhabitants. You know that it can be difficult for a person who has returned from battle or stressful military service to reintegrate into so-called normal everyday life. You know that veterans can feel isolated and alone, even in the midst of family and friends, because there are so few around who truly understand their experience. Thus, we ask you to place in the paths of our veterans those who do understand, or at least strive to understand, that they might feel at least a little bit less alone. Remind them often that while their fellow human beings may never fully comprehend, you, O God, see, know, and identify with them in all that they have endured. Almighty God, you know each and every veteran by name. You know their deeds, you know their hard work, you know their suffering, you know their sacrifice, and you know their perseverance. You know their needs, both material and spiritual. Draw each one closer to you and grant them a peace that passes all understanding, the peace of Christ to rule in their hearts and in their minds and in their souls from this time forth and forevermore. Hear us, O God, for we lift up our prayers in Jesus' name. Amen.
And at this time, I'd like to welcome the VFW Post 2006 Color Guard and the Vietnam Veterans Post 52 for our flag raising and volley. I'd like to introduce Eric Henry, who is going to say our Pledge of Allegiance.
If we could, we'd all start with a moment of silence of all the veterans, of friends and family we've lost throughout the years. And now the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to thank Molly Moyer and her students for coming down and singing the national anthem for us. And at this time, I would like to welcome you all inside for the Missing Man ceremony, and then we'll have breakfast. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to our veterans so much for your service today and in the past and going forward in the future. It is very much appreciated. So welcome, come inside.
The membership and the officers, happy Veterans Day. In addition, we're here to guide you through the missing man ceremony. As you all know, we have warriors missing from all wars, dated back to the Civil War, of course. This is the missing man ceremony. Please direct your attention to the table placed to my right. It is a physical symbol of the thousands of American POWs and MIAs still unaccounted for from all foreign conflicts. We would ask that you stand reflecting in silent prayer for those warriors who have yet to find their way home. Thank you. You may be seated. Now we would like to explain the symbolism of this ceremony as the veterans of the Vietnam War Post-52 Honor Guard places items upon the table. Those who have served and those who are currently serving are ever mindful that the sweetness of enduring peace has always been tainted by the bitterness of personal sacrifice. We are compelled to never forget that while we enjoy our daily pleasures, there are others who have endured and may still be enduring the agonies of pain, deprivation, or imprisonment. A reminder for us all to spare no effort to secure the release of any American prisoners from captivity. The repatriation of the remains of those who died bravely in defense of liberty, and demand a full accounting for those missing in action. We call them comrades. They are unable to be with their loved ones and their families, so we join together to pay humble tribute to them and to bear witness to their continued absence. The table is small, symbolizing the helplessness of one prisoner alone against his or her oppressors. The tablecloth is white. It is symbolic of the purity of their intentions to respond to their country's call to arms. Our comrades are missing from the United States Army. Our comrades are missing from the United States Navy. Our comrades are missing from the United States Air Force. Our comrades are missing from the United States Marine Corps. Our comrades are missing from the United States Coast Guard. The single rose in the vase signifies the blood they may have shed in sacrifice to ensure the freedom of our beloved United States of America. This rose also reminds us of the family and friends of our missing comrades who keep faith while awaiting their return. The red ribbon on the vase represents the red ribbons worn on the lapels of thousands who demand with unyielding determination a proper accounting of our comrades who are not among us. A slice of lemon on the plate reminds us of their bitter fate. The salt sprinkled on the plate reminds us of the countless fallen tears of their families as they wait. The glass is inverted. They cannot toast with us at this time. The Bible is placed prominently on the table. The Bible represents the strength gained through faith to sustain those lost from our country. The United States was founded as one nation under God. The chair is empty. They are not here. The candle is reminiscent of the light of hope that lives in our hearts to illuminate their way home, away from their captors to the open arms of a grateful nation. The American flag reminds us that many of them may never return and have paid the supreme sacrifice to ensure our freedom. Let us pray to the Supreme Commander that all of our comrades will soon be back within our ranks. Let us remember and never, ever forget their sacrifices. May God watch over them and protect them and their families, and may each of us live worthy of their sacrifices in the way that we love and in the way that we serve. Thank you for your attention.
Face. Forward, march. Detail, halt. All out.
You're welcome to have some coffee, juice, and some Danishes. We are ready to get started, and I would like to introduce our first speaker. It is Rich Anton from Froggy Media, Rockin' Rich, if you've heard him on the radio. So he is going to share a pretty amazing story with you. So Rich, thank you.
Thank you so much, and good morning. Happy Veterans Day to all of you who have worn the uniform, who have taken the oath to defend our country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I appreciate each and every one of you. You have my heartfelt respect for the rest of my life for what you've done. So thank you so much. We salute each and every one of you today. I'm humbled to be a part of this Through a Veteran's Eye ceremony today here at Active Aging. I'm glad we have somewhat of a more advanced ceremony this year than we did last, and I think next year will even be bigger and better. I've been a professional broadcaster since 1978. That's been my calling in life. I've worked locally here in Crawford County for Forever Media, specifically on Rocky, formerly was a long time ago. Been here for nearly 18 years. And I've been hosting the Rocky Morning Show all those years. And part of the thing I do with the morning show, and part of my commitment to my audience, is to make sure that they are always aware of the concerns of our veterans in our community. I do a special on the show every morning at 8:35. It's called Voices for Vets. And it's just to remind our listeners every day that our military personnel have had our backs over the years. We, as a community, need to continue to have their backs now as they are in their veteran status, and for some of them are getting advanced age and some health problems. We need to be there for them, for whatever need they have, because they made that commitment to defend us and keep our freedoms alive here in the United States. I'm an enthusiastic supporter of our men and women serving in the armed forces, and I come from a family that's rich in military service and sacrifice. And that's where my story starts. On April 26th, 1941, my uncle, James Edward Anton, was sworn into the United States Army. I didn't know anything about him. I have his middle name. My middle name is James. He passed away 17 years before I was born. So growing up, I had his middle name, and I had 4 pictures of him. Because of the big age difference between us, and quite honestly, my father was Jim's younger brother. My father was almost 7 years old when his older brother died in the Second World War. So I didn't know anything about him. My grandparents were advanced in years. My grandfather died when I was 3 months old. My grandmother was in a nursing home for most of my teenage years. And as most teenagers, we don't have the forethought to maybe ask about our family and family history and family roots. Sometimes that just comes to us when we're a little older, curious about our history. I got into Ancestry.com and I wanted to learn more. But all I had were 4 pictures and a middle name. I wanted to learn more. I didn't have any family to give me any information. No one knew anything. When Sergeant James Edward Anton died in the line of service to his country, after that happened, my grandparents, this was their firstborn son, my grandparents packed up his material, his personal belongings and everything related to him in a strong box and put him in a closet on a shelf, never to be discussed again. It was just too painful for them to do that. I can respect that. I know other families that have gone through the same. But that left him a mystery. And I think there's a story there, and I was eager to find that story. You know, a middle name has its purpose. We are honored with middle names from maybe a family member, maybe some celebrity, maybe a saint, but my middle name honors my uncle James Edward Anton. At approximately 2:20 a.m., September 2nd, 1942, pilot Lieutenant William Brian Rittenhouse, co-pilot Stanley Hecker, and aerial engineer Sergeant James Anton were killed when their B-26 Marauder bomber crashed into the Gulf of Mexico while on an overnight training patrol mission about 7¼ miles south of MacDill Field in Tampa, Florida. Sobering statistics state, and I've only really discovered these in the last couple of months, that between 13,000 and 15,000 U.S. airmen and crew were killed in training missions alone, in training accidents alone, between 1939 and 1945. That number alone is 6 times the number of American deaths on D-Day. Now, while these men and women perhaps didn't get a chance to see actual combat that they were training for, they still wore the same boots, they still wore the same flight jackets, they still wore the same and were engineering and operating the same equipment as their brothers in arms who were fighting across the pond. My Uncle Jim was just 23 years old when he passed away, serving in the Army Air Corps. Due to the nature of the accident, all 3 members could not be positively identified. And all 3 are buried in a common casket, buried with full military honors at St. Augustine, Florida National Cemetery on September 9th, 1942. Like I said, my grandparents were given his personal effects, brought them home, and packed them away. And they were unseen for 78 years. That's where my part of the story starts. I wasn't given any detailed information about him. So it wasn't until 10 years ago, here in Meadville, Pennsylvania, that I was able to get some help from my friends at the Veterans of the Vietnam War Post 52, which I'm a lifetime civilian member of the Veterans Welcome Home Association. So I have a deep respect and appreciation for these men and women of the Post. But I got some help from the Post members, too, with support from Kim Lingling and Phil Davis and other members of the Post. They encouraged me to dig deeper and find out more about my uncle. Since my father at the time was battling dementia, Parkinson's, and other health issues, he was the next of kin in order to get records about my uncle. He was unable to do that. He just wasn't in the shape. I was next in line. So I asked for, all you could do is request, I asked for his military records through the proper channels. And I was granted those records. Those records, a lot of those records from the World War II veteran communities there were lost in 1973, where they were stored in a special facility in St. Louis. There was a fire there, and it took a lot of those records out. And those records were all paper records. They weren't digital yet. They were just old-fashioned paper records. So a lot of them were lost. My wife's father's records, for that matter, were lost. So we don't have anything on him. But when I applied for these records, I was happy to see that about 8 weeks after I asked for the records, 8 weeks later, they were sent to our local Veteran Affairs office here in Crawford County. Had a manila envelope with 80 pages of records pertaining to my uncle. Because of that fire, a lot of those records, although some of them were legible, kind of, sort of, but most of them were there, but they were all fire singed and soot all over these records. But it still covered his entire story, his entire year-and-a-half history in the United States military. Again, not knowing anything about his personal life, all I do know now is what he did for a year and a half from April 1941 through September 1942. I have every physical, I have every test score, I have things that at least I know about him. I didn't know how tall he was. He was 5'4". Didn't know how much he weighed. Weighed 112 pounds. Somewhere in the genetic pool here, I got lost in that. It didn't work for me, but I found out, his fingerprints were there, his hair color, brown, his eye and hearing exams, everything was there. His signature on the paper was just amazing to see. Again, this is all I saw when I got these records back. So I began to think, I'm getting to know this man. I'm getting to know my uncle, at least what he did for a year and a half in the United States military. The training that he was going through was a follow-up to what he did as a civilian prior to joining the military. He worked for Piper Corporation in Lock Haven. He flew Piper Cubs. He was a pilot, had his pilot license, and he was a mechanic. So when he joined the Army, and he joined prior to the war, he joined in April 1941. So we weren't at war yet, but he had a calling to serve his country. He knew what he wanted to do, and he wanted to be in the air. Unfortunately for his height and weight, he wasn't quite pilot material. Also, as an enlisted man, wasn't quite pilot material, as pilots were officers. But he did get in the air through his MOS as a military aerial engineer. But by far, out of all the papers of 80 pages worth, the most gut-wrenching and most powerful that I read were the documents describing the discovery of the crash records of the B-26B Marauder bomber number 4117661 collided with the surface of Tampa Bay in the Gulf of Mexico, 7¼ miles southwest of Meadville, Florida, 2 September 1942 at approximately 02:20 hours. Fast forward to June last year, a few weeks after my father passed away, I was given a storage bin of family-related items. Now, my father and I were estranged. My father and mother divorced when I was young, so I was estranged from him, didn't have a very deep relationship until the latter part of his life, where we tied up some loose ends, we made amends with each other, and as much of a discussion I can have about the family with someone who's going through dementia and Parkinson's, we did the best we could. But after he passed, I was given a medium-sized storage bin with dozens of photographs, old pictures of him, my father when he was a youngster, with his older brother Jim, pictures of my grandparents that I didn't have, and there was the lockbox, a strong box with a key with all of Jim Anton's personal effects that were given to his parents upon his death. The most important thing that I found in that lockbox, in addition to some of these pictures that you're seeing behind me of his dog tags that were recovered from the crash site, his ribbons, his patches from his uniform, his rosary. But the most incredible thing was this diary. For a 22, 23-year-old young man to write down his experiences every day in this diary. This is what was given to him in the service, my life in the service. And most, I think all enlisted men at that time were given that. Most didn't use it. He did. And he wrote down everything from the day he was inducted to 6 hours before he died. The last diary entry was logged September 1st, 1942. I would suspect he was going on an all-night mission. Most likely he was still up and about early evening, 7, 8 o'clock, preparing for his flight and making his last diary entry. That, to me, when I read that, and I've read it over a dozen times already, and every time I read it, I get a little bit more out of it. I get to know a little bit more about him, not just the sterile official forms from the United States military with his physicals and things like that. I got to know a little bit more about him through his words, his feelings of what was going on. For someone who was 22, 23 years old serving his country shortly before and the early months of World War II. I wanted to share some of these diary entries from Sergeant Anton, and that's why I have some of these pictures up here. If you could see some of these, you can't read them, I know that, but this is his penmanship. Not bad for a young man who not so much the penmanship, I was able to read it, but just his insight, his thoughts, what he was thinking about. Just a few of these diary entries I just thought I'd share with you this morning. 8:20 p.m., April 26, 1941. I was sworn into the United States Army in Altoona, PA. drafted and inducted into Lock Haven. Lock Haven is where he was working for Piper. He was sent to New Cumberland, PA the same night. After a plate of cold beans, he writes, at 3 a.m., became a member of Company C, went through the process of becoming a soldier, and was classified for the Air Corps, but left for South Carolina on April 30th, arrived at Camp Croft May 1st, find himself in Company A, 31st Infantry, Training Battalion, Machine Gun Platoon. 13 weeks of the hardest weeks of my life, he writes so far. Hot sun, dust, sandstorms, learning the tactics of an infantry soldier. Running through the woods, fields, creek beds, getting chiggers, all the bayonet drills, rifle drills, everything that goes into your basic training in the Army at that time in our history. Started his, he was in the regular Army. This is the other thing too. He enlisted in the regular Army in April of 1941. August 19th, he asked for a discharge from regular Army in order to enlist into the Air Corps the following day. Closer to get him into the air is what all he wanted to be, was in the air. He started Air Corps School on September 15th, learning to be an air mechanic, all the basics of structures, hydraulics, props, instruments, ignition. The U.S. declared war on Japan Monday morning, December 8, 1941, as a result of the Pearl Harbor attack. He writes, the President's request in Congress declaration of war was on the broadcast in the radio. It was an event worth remembering when heard from an Army barracks. And all I think now is just maybe some of our current veterans right now who maybe first heard about 9/11 in their barracks. And the same kind of feeling must have gone through his mind as well. He kept his training up. He said he cleared on February 12, 1942, cleared my first ship today. A great feeling to wave a pilot off, knowing that he's put his confidence in you. Ships are coming and going all the time here. I've often envied the men working at our air base. Now, I'm one of them. He goes on to write through certain other entries here about the planes that are having difficulty as they prepare these airships for battle, whether it be Germany, whether it be Japan. These planes, a lot of them, were still a work in progress. And the B-26 in particular was a work in progress. Going back and looking about the B-26, there were B-26A, B, C, D. It went up the alphabet quite a while before they finally got it right. And when they got the planes right, that's when they shipped them all over. Predominantly, they did a lot of action over in Europe. But that got me thinking too, based on what happened to him, the amount of problems that were going on with the B-26. And reading a little bit deeper into the history of the plane, in 1942, between, say, July and October of 42, they were having an awful lot of trouble with those planes. A lot of them were crashing. He writes in his diary about hydraulics and brakes locking up on landing and crash landings at the field on a regular basis. That plane, the B-26, was given the nickname the Widowmaker, and also given a nickname one a day in the bay. There was a period of time that there truly was one going down a day in the bay of Tampa Bay. But he kept moving forward. He writes, February 20th, 1942, a beautiful summer-like day, swell flying weather. Swell is one of his favorite words. And I've always enjoyed the word swell. I guess it was hereditary after all. It's just a genetic word, but for me it works, and it worked for him. Would give a lot for a Cub, a Piper Cub. Hard to believe I'm in Mississippi at an air base working on bombers now. Was at Piper last February. Wonder where I'll be next February. That kind of hit me too. In March, a B-24 heavy bomber landed here today, a real airplane. If we can't win the war with ships like that, no one can. MacArthur is now in Australia, a lot of fighting taking place there. 3/19/1942. He was in the Army, as I told you, for a year and a half. He had one leave, and that was it, and that was right before he joined the Air Corps. So towards the end of his regular Army stint there, he got a 1-week leave. There's some pictures up behind me of him in uniform. with my father, a little boy there. He was excited to get a furlough, packed for his furlough. 3:20, called over to the orderly room about getting the furlough tonight, leaving tomorrow. Can't believe it, he writes. The next day, the most unhappy day of my life. Received furlough papers this morning. Also arrived in Patterson Field in a B-26 bomber, got my chute, was waiting for the plane, and the furlough was canceled. A terrible disappointment. Came awfully close to getting home. Learning to take it. That leave in August of 1941 was the last time he saw his family. In May, spent all afternoon checking our new B-26As. See, we're on the A's now. Got swell birthday and Easter cards from Ann, his girlfriend back home, his mom, his dad, brother. My 22nd year is just about over, he writes. 4/26/1942, in the Army 1 year today. Have covered little ground and have many new experiences this year. Went to Mass in the chapel tent this morning, he writes. 4/27, went on the line today, went over the B-25C, great plane. I'm an aerial engineer, he writes. I fly with the ship all the time, the best job in the squadron. Act as co-pilot and take care of the ship in general. Won't have to watch them fly over anymore now. I'll be up there flying, he writes. Took a physical exam for combat crew today, he writes on 4/30. Passed okay. And passing through a stage right now of mixed feelings as to what the outcome will be, he writes. Still want to fly, so I guess it's the best thing. He writes, I am, so far, as any human being in the world can be, in a world gone mad, I'm happy. And I'm doing what I most want to do, what I ought to do, and I'm giving it my best. May 5th, 1942, drew my first real pay, $72. The 8th Reconnaissance Squadron has been changed to the 398th Bomb Squadron. We'll see more of Tokyo or Berlin soon, he writes. 5/9, he writes, the Navy just completed the biggest naval battle of the war, an attempt to invade, the Japanese attempted to invade Australia. The best thing, this kind of thing gives a spine-tingling sensation and makes me feel very American, especially when the national anthem is played. Flew for the first time in a bomber tonight, he writes. Went over to Atlanta, really a sensation, giving something different about a military ship. It's great to be flying again. Also made corporal, something to write home about, he says. Mother's Day, May 10th, flew all afternoon on Mother's Day. Went on a bombing mission, flew above the clouds, adjusted the top turret. Great. 5/11, first day with my stripes on, felt pretty good. Flying tonight, first time at nighttime. 5/12, flew in the pilot's cockpit last night as an engineer, a real experience. The next best thing to being the pilot. Towards the end of May, he writes, flew for 3.5 hours today above and through the clouds. Rode in the bombardier's compartment for the first time. It's like sitting in space in a glass bowl. Again, I was taken by, again, his youthfulness, his youthful excitement. He was in it 110%. Let's go. Nothing getting in his way as far as learning what he needed to learn. He knew the team he was on. He knew what the mission was going to be. June 2nd, went to Fort Worth last night. Landed at Terminal Airport, or learned at the airline terminal. Had lunch at the terminal restaurant with officers while waiting for gas. Didn't start back till 4 a.m. Saw the dawn from the air. I liked it. He writes, lost plane 52 and 8 men today. Ship crashed and burned coming into Mobile, Alabama. Tough. Was to go to Houston tonight, but all ships are grounded. 6/3, ships grounded, no flying for a few days. This accident's hard to believe. 6/7, had a chance to attend Mass this morning. Plane 91 cracked up on the runway. Hydraulic failure, no wheels, no one hurt this time. 3rd plane in a month for us, he writes. 6:10, flew this morning as a turret gunner, first time in the air in a week. The roughest ride I have ever had. Floated most of the time, he writes. 6:26, left Meridian at 5:50 a.m., waited all night for a train, very little sleep as he was moving to Tampa. They went by train. He said he was corporal of the guard on that train. They stopped in Columbus, Georgia for an hour of calisthenics, ran around the town double time to show the infantry what the Air Corps can do, he writes. 6:27, arrived in Tampa this morning at 7:45, made good time. Looks like a swell place. Palm trees, moss, just like the pictures. MacDill Field is a big place. Tampa Bay is just a block away from the barracks. You can look out the window and see the water. It's beautiful. Swell PX, cafe, service club, etc. Went out to the beach this evening. Looks swell to see some water for a change. Seems so unusual to be in Florida, though. This is a Western Pennsylvania boy we're talking about. Flew to Baton Rouge on 6:30 in a B-26B. First time in a Martin, a swell ship. Flew over the Gulf, out of sight of land for about 2 hours. Flew at 2 feet off the surface coming back. A real experience. 6:24, spent the day loading up. I got my, oh, okay, that's good. Loading up and continuing work on the B-26B. Experienced my first accident today, he writes, on July 2nd. The first accident that he was in a plane with. He said the landing gear collapsed, but we were lucky, no one got hurt. 7-6, pre-flighting my own ship now, flying every day and night, getting plenty of hours. Oh, for a furlough, he writes. 7-14, I'm now a sergeant. I feel pretty well satisfied. Flying every day, averaging 5-7 hours in the air. I have my own room now. Never thought I'd make it. Towards the end of July, presented with my warrants for corporal and sergeant by Colonel Lee, gave us a talk, non-coms, about the future. We are to form a combat group, the 322nd, and permanent group, the 336th. My fingers are crossed. 7:30, checking off taxiing on a B-26 today. Not bad, only 4 master sergeants qualified. Flew patrol this afternoon over the Gulf, out of sight of land for 4 hours. Carried depth charges, no luck. Early August, spent the evening in town with my friend Schubert. Had a great time. Went to Tampa this afternoon, saw a show, had supper. A relief from the regular schedule. Patrol again tonight on August 3rd. Saw plenty of ships, but no subs. Piloted the ship for an hour. A bomber pilot, he writes. A real ship to fly. It doesn't fly itself like a Cub. 8/11, holiday for the 398th Bomb Squad, best squadron in the group. Stayed in town last night, took it easy today. Great to act civilian for a while. 8/17, flying transition every day. Interesting to talk to new pilots as they learn the new B-26. I almost think I can even land one by now. Doing a lot of night flying. Listen to some good radio programs tonight while flying. The reception is great. Went on a bombing mission this morning, he writes, on the 18th of August. Dropped 2,000 pounds of bombs in the water range in the Gulf. Got in 3 hours of night flying tonight. Was pitch dark. Listened to Jimmy J and Dick Juergens on the radio. 8:23, flew over 10 hours today. Morning, noon, and night. Afternoon flight was extra. Went up as a passenger to relax in the tail. He writes, relaxing in a bomber, it can be done. Just routine, he says. 8:26, stranded in Sarasota, forced down by bad storms after flying formation with 6 P-39s. All pursuit ships there treated us well. Sat in the operations tent most of the night swapping pursuit bomber stories. Saw what makes the Airacobra tick. Explained by 2 of its pilots in exchange for my knowledge of a B-26B. Swell fellows. Regular flying, he writes, on 8/27, again with Lieutenant Rittenhouse. Shot my first landing in a bomber, took off and landed the ship from the co-pilot seat, something to be proud of. Landed at 140 miles an hour. 9/1/1942. Flew this morning at 8 a.m. went to 7,000 feet and practiced single engine operations. Flew on one engine well, had a runway prop while starting up again. Worked out okay though. Beautiful flying. Went above 3 layers of clouds like a picture. Makes one realize that flying is the best job. Going to get more of it tonight from 11:30 p.m. till 4 a.m. His plane went down at 2:20 a.m., September 2nd, 1942. That last diary entry still chokes me up a bit. But it also makes me very happy and proud at the same time, because he was, if you're going to learn a lesson about living life, you know, the future's not here yet. The past is past, doesn't matter anymore. What matters is the present. That's why they're called presents, right? Everybody likes to open a present. Well, that moment at that time, and this moment in our time right now, is our present. Let's open that present. I'm a proud nephew of a World War II casualty, but discovering him after 78 years was one of the best treasures of my entire life. And I'm happy and honored to tell his story. My son also bears his name as well, James Edward Anton. My son's name is Edward. And it just all makes sense. And we're planning now a father-son road trip next year, next September, hopefully, if all works out well, to remember the 80th anniversary of his death in St. Augustine. We hope to get down there to see the marker there. But I just wanted to say again to all of you here, thank you for your attention today. Thank each and every one of you for your service, who's the military veterans here in this audience and those watching. I want to challenge each and every one of you to take the time, take the effort, do the work to learn about your family members who have served their country. And those of you in families who are lucky enough to still have veterans alive and well, relatively speaking, talk to them. Talk to them. Some may tell their stories, some may not. Most will probably give you edited versions, but it's still nonetheless, it's a discussion on what they did. And it's like as old-fashioned as you can get. We hand down our stories verbally. But we need to talk to our veterans and learn their stories, savor those stories, and pass those stories along to future generations. Because what each and every one of you did is important, it's meaningful, and I salute each and every one of you for your service to your country, as much as I salute my family members for doing their job as well. I wish you all a blessed Veterans Day. God bless our military men and women still serving their country now, and to all of our veterans, thank you so much for your service. Have a wonderful day. These, by the way, you can't read them, but this is all his handwriting here, and some of the pictures going through. There's a couple of pictures. When I say 4 pictures and a middle name, 2 pictures were of my uncle as a private in the regular Army, and 2 pictures of him after he earned his sergeant stripes. Those are the 4 pictures I have. I end up getting a few more after I was given some materials after my father passed. So there were pictures of Jim as a little boy, as a teenager driving his first car, and pictures of him with my father. My father said he doesn't remember much about his older brother. He said that his one memory of Jim, of his brother, is that he was always away. He wasn't around very much because he was another adult. Jim was an oops baby. My grandparents were married in January of 1919. Jim was born January of 1919. Jim was born April 1919. So figure that one out. And then my father was born 17 years after Jim was born. Oops. And then I kind of weird that 17 number, 17 years after Jim passes, I was born. So there's something there perhaps, but my father says the one memory he has is his aunts had to come and stay with him when he started first grade to start him off to school in September 1942 because his parents had to go down to St. Augustine and bury their firstborn son. And he said that it was never the same when they came back. So I've been blessed to have this material handed back to me. I'll pass it along to my son one day, and we'll keep his memory alive. But that's what it's about. We need to keep these memories and these stories alive. Once again, thank you for your time, and enjoy your Veterans Day, everybody. Peace.
Could I have your attention, please? I'm going to introduce our next speaker. I'd like to welcome you here today. Every Veterans Day, there's a couple quotes that are my favorite quotes. One of them was made by Winston Churchill. He said, "The most exhilarating feeling in the world is to be fired upon without result." And the other one was written by a Vietnam veteran. It said, "The most exhilarating feeling in the world is to be, for those who have fought for it, life has a special flavor that the protected will never know." And they were kind of my two favorite quotes. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce a good friend of mine, Major Glenn Kennedy, retired Major Glenn Kennedy with the National Guard. He's going to give you a talk and explain to you what the National Guard is all about. So without further ado, Major Kennedy.
I got a lot of questions. This thing working? Yeah, hold it close. Who I am, what I was, and what I did. Give a little background. How many Navy guys we got in here? Uncle George enlisted in the Navy in 1938. Pearl Harbor broke out in 1941. He was the fire controlman on the turrets of a destroyer. After the first battle at Pearl Harbor, the next one is 6 months later at Coral Sea, and he was there. His ship was sunk. There were 12 survivors, and he was one of them. Goes back to Pearl, he re-enlists. Now that took a set of cojones I don't think I got. Because after that he was at Midway, Lady Gulf, and finally off the coast of Okinawa his ship was attacked with 8 kamikazes. They got 6 of them. 2 of them got through, blew the bow off the ship and the forward gun turret, and him also. And I'm looking at this as a 17-year-old kid, and I'm thinking, I can't swim that good, and there's big things under the water will eat me. So I decided to stay on the ground. Also at that same time, I'm looking at the big guys. In 1964, the draft was going on, and you didn't get your notice until you were 22, 23 years old. And it didn't matter if you married or kids, you were going. And I'm thinking, I'm not waiting. So I'm going to do something, but I'm going to have a good summer. The original intent was I'm going Airborne Ranger for the Army. In fact, my high school term paper was on Rangers. Gilbert Allen, one of the local guys, a friend of mine, he was a couple years older, he had the same thing. We're not going to wait. So he says, let's take a ride. We ended up over in Corey, Pennsylvania at the National Guard Armory. And I did not know that I had choices. We had the family business. We owned a garage and a gas station.
I thought, why not? So I did. Mom's going ballistic because of what happened to her brother. Dad signs a paper because I'm still 17. And I entered the 1st Battalion, 112th Infantry, Pennsylvania National Guard. And Dad says, well, you just jumped into one of the toughest combat units from World War II. Said, life's a you know what, you just made a decision. I entered active duty April of '65. The biggest thing going on was the 82nd Airborne was down in the Dominican Republic. And in my world as a kid, Vietnam was unheard of. June of '65, I'm in basic training, and Vietnam opens up. Okay, all you NGs, you're in it now, because when war broke out in America, the reserves were activated, and here we go. I'm thinking, damn, I ain't Airborne Ranger. Well, that's okay. If you get assigned Fort Polk, you're going to Vietnam. Kennedy, Fort Polk. Down I go. I'm thinking, well, I'll just transfer, enlist, or volunteer, or whatever. That was not the case. I don't know how many of you are young enough to remember the 60s with all the civil disturbances, riots, and everything that we had. Pennsylvania National Guard had to deal with that, and you could not get out. You were in it until your hitch was up. So I determined to be the best that I could. Training was a little different back then. I determined to be the best that I could possibly be with what was available. I'm a Mustang. I was enlisted first. I rose to a platoon sergeant, and they came after me to go to officer candidate school. So finally I said, okay, but I'm not going to the guard school. You send me down to Fort Benning or I'm not going at all. And they did. Surprised me. And things took off from there. So what about the Guard? A lot of people think they know what it is. A lot of people say, well, you do this, you do that. You guard the home front, you do this. Well, that's the secondary mission of the National Guard. How far back does it go? Well, back to times in the early days of Meadville, Pennsylvania. Alan Eckert wrote a book called The Frontiersman, and it's all about the Indian Wars all around Venango, Meadville. It's a fictional book based on historical fact. So who were the original National Guardsmen? Those were the militiamen, the Minutemen, called out at a minute's notice to take care of whatever had to be done. Now, this is a copy of the Constitution of the United States that I got from General Dunleavy. You know him as Judge Dunleavy from Erie County Courts. And in the Constitution of the United States, under Section 7, the Constitution grants to make war, letters of marque, reprisal, rules concerning capture of land and water. Also, to provide calling forth the militia, execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrection, and repel invasions. To provide for organizing, arming, and discipline of the militia. governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states the appointment of the officers and the authority of training, and the training is according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. What's the militia? Well, under the Pennsylvania Constitution, and these are still in effect, some rewritten as amendments as late as 2003, but this one still stands. The militia of the Commonwealth shall consist of all able-bodied citizens of the United States and other able-bodied persons who have declared their intention to live in the Commonwealth, who are at least 17 and 1/2 years old and not older than 55. If you're over 55, you're free and clear. But if you're under 55, you're subject to recall through the Constitution of the state of Pennsylvania. The governor, as the commander-in-chief of the Pennsylvania National Guard, can draft from the militia for emergencies. The governor shall assume the obligation of carrying out training requirements set forth under applicable federal statutes and regulations for the Pennsylvania National Guard. The governor shall have the power to order out for actual service with the Pennsylvania National Guard by draft as many personnel as the militia is necessary. The governor may place the Pennsylvania National Guard into the service of the United States when needed. These are still on the books. A lot of people don't know about them. Now, the Pennsylvania National Guard, the 28th Division, and especially the 1st Battalion, 112th Infantry that I retired out of, is still active. The headquarters that I was in was out of Erie, Pennsylvania. It has now been transferred to Cambridge Springs. The striker unit that was out here was part of the 1st and 112th. The 28th Division, the Pennsylvania National Guard, is the Army's oldest division. Came into being, as we know it now, as a division headquarters in 1879. So we fast forward to where we're at today. But first I got to go backwards to the area that we're most familiar with, and that's the Vietnam era. We had in our inventory 16 active duty divisions and 8 National Guard divisions. At least we did until the Clinton administration. The time in that era was like, we got to drop the defense budget. Okay, we can use that money for education, we can use it for this and that. But in that time, in those 16 regular divisions, back up 8 of those divisions. Of those 8 active duty divisions, 4 of them, their 3rd brigade was a National Guard brigade. The other 4, their 3rd brigade, their 3rd battalion was a National Guard battalion. That's a lot of stuff that we had to do and still maintain the stuff that we had to do internally. In that time frame, and I was on active duty when this happened, June of 1965, when President Johnson opened up Vietnam. Okay, all you National Guards, you NGs, you're in it now. And it was. We went to war. If you were on active duty, you're into it for the duration. I mentioned that I was wanting to go Airborne Ranger. You had orders for Fort Polk, Louisiana. You were heading for Vietnam. You were infantry. And that was to acclimate you to the temperatures and different changes in the Vietnam country. You could not get out of the National Guard. They had you. We had all the civil disturbances going on. We had to train for it. And at the same time, try and maintain our readiness status as far as being a part of the country's combat forces. What most people don't realize that your reserve combat power is in the National Guard. We're talking infantry and armored divisions. The Army Reserve is support units. They took all the combat units out of the Army Reserve and put them in the National Guard. At the same time, they introduced a 150,000 man corps level unit on 24-hour for Vietnam. There was 3 Guard divisions, the 26th out of the Massachusetts, the 28th of Pennsylvania, and I don't remember the armor unit out of Texas. We're called weekend warriors because we drilled 1 weekend a month. If you were on that force, it's called the Select Reserve Force, your drills were doubled. Twice a month, and we were on it for 2 years. In 1969, they ended it. It was deemed that we weren't combat ready. Well, golly gee, how are we supposed to train for warfare and deal with all the riots that we got going on over here? A little bit of a tough thing to do. McNamara, and I read his book, and in fact he apologized for what he did during Vietnam. He was Secretary of Defense. Recommended calling up 235,000 National Guards for Vietnam. President Johnson rejected the proposal. He was reluctant to alarm or antagonize the public. In '67, McNamara assigned the National Guard for combat and combat support. And as I said before, the reserves combat service support. A lot of changes, a lot of maneuvering around, but that's just the way it was. And in those days, with the riots going on, is where we got our basic bad rap. Those who did serve in Vietnam, yellow bellies, chicken soldiers, draft dodgers, I heard them all, called them all. Again, that's the way it was. The riots was our country's unrest. Social upheaval, pretty much the same as what we got going on today. I felt that we had a good system and I determined to be the best that I could be. Talking to a gentleman over here who's POW in Korea. Called him a coward because he was captured, but yet he's one of the chosen few. If you're familiar with the Chosin Reservoir of Korea, that was one nasty son of a gun of a fight. After the riots were down, now we had to deal with the campus riots. Our students against the Vietnam War doing their thing, and you're all familiar with Kent State. Okay? I can tell you when you go into a riot, the first thing you do is you got the bullhorns, this and that. Please leave, go away. So after the civil disturbance was settled and we moved into the campus riots, the reason we had the campus riots is that the Army needed 6,000 second lieutenants a year. West Point Officer Candidate School, ROTC, those campuses had an ROTC contingent on campus. Those riots were instigated to disrupt the flow of the officer corps that was badly needed in Vietnam. I do not know, and I'm willing to let anybody correct me, if they can come up with a university or college that had a campus riot that did not have an ROTC unit, I'd like to know about it. From there, we're now moving back to combat training after things are settled down. But along comes Hurricane Agnes. Now this time we're pulled for state active duty because of the floods over in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre area. We were there for 2 weeks. It was terrible. The older generation sometimes trapped up the ceiling and they drowned. A building like this would be completely submerged underwater. From there, the Pennsylvania National Guard had a trucker strike. We were called out for that. And talking with a gentleman that I found out later was the same place I was, the Cuban Riots. People say, you've never heard of the Cuban Riots. Well, Castro opened its prisons out. All the homosexuals, bad guys, Murielitos, everybody was thrown onto the boats, kicked out of there, sent to the United States. There were 14,000 Cubans that ended up at Fort Indian Town Gap, Pennsylvania. Another batch were at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas. Out of those 14, 8,000 got introduced into American society. 8,000 left. A riot. Killed 2 regular Army MPs and put another 40 in the hospital. First the 112th National Guard was out in the field, and 90 minutes later, back into the cantonment area, dropped the combat gear, face shields, riot batons, and we surrounded them. Never heard about it, unless you were there. Then we had the hurricanes and the tornadoes. Albion got hit the worst, but there was 4 other ones that just come through this area. And again, the 112th National Guard was there to do their thing. So we have a dual role with the National Guard, defense of the state, defense of the country, and I think we do it pretty well. It's the one time that where you need some help, do you get an automatic control group with maybe one guy to do it. You got all your personnel assigned right there. If you leave it to civilians, you got time to get all that constructed. And we're there now, and we can do the job. The rest of the story, Paul Harvey, is one of my favorite commentators, a master of the pause. How many Vietnam veterans we got here? Here's the rest of the story. The word on the street in the time, you know, well, our government lost 2 wars. They lost Korea and they lost Vietnam. That's not true. Every time our forces tangled with battle in Vietnam, they got their butts handed to them. We never lost a battle. We had 58,000 guys killed. What you don't know is you took out 1.5 million. And what happened is our President Nixon has struck a deal to get us out of Vietnam. So combat operations ended in 1973. And by the way, there were 25,000 National Guardsmen in Vietnam. He brokered a deal. As I said, combat operations ended in 73. We did do support roles, and I'm not saying there weren't some firefights going on. I don't know. I wasn't there. But we got out in 1975. And what happened is what nobody planned on. The 6-day war between the Israelis and the Egyptians. Nobody planned that going on, but we promised the Israelis that we would fill up their losses. So they came to the guard units, they took all our radios away, they took away our certain weapon systems and everything, and it was sent to Israel. We were operating rifle companies with a radio. I had the battalion heavy mortar platoon. I got 300 rounds a day and I shot for 3 days at my annual training. The following year I got 60 for the whole 2 weeks. Where did all that material come from that went to Israel? It came out of us, came out of the National Guard. Now at that same time, some bureaucrat declared that the Russians would be taken off the favored trade status. Well, that ticked off the Russians. They rearmed the North, and you know the rest is history. But we had also brokered a deal that we would support the South Vietnamese army. And we couldn't because we gave it all to Israel. And that's sometimes how politics work. So let's go forward to where we are today and bring you up to date on a few things. Within the Pennsylvania Constitution, and I have the book right over there laying on the table, under Article 21, okay, and these amendments are pretty much up to date. The last one was in 2003. There's always a big hullabaloo. Section 21, the right of the citizens to bear arms in defense of themselves and the state shall not be questioned. As you know, the Supreme Court addressed the Second Amendment or permits a couple days ago. And I take that back. Some of these amendments go up to May 18th of 2021. It's still on the books. So don't let anybody try and tell you that the Guard isn't willing to go. We're probably the best trained, best equipped reserve force that the country has. In fact, the 1st and 112th, to my knowledge, is the only National Guard unit that got the strikers. And they were in combat with them, I think, 2006 or 2007. I watched on TV the riots going on in Portland, Seattle, Chicago, and I'm talking the ones within the last year. And I'm thinking, wow, 50 years after the fact is deja vu all over again. I keep this on my desk, and what it is an FBI report. And what I'm going to say from now on, I'm going to say to you guys as voters, you need to pay attention to who you're voting for, how good they are, and what you think is going to happen. And this is from 2018, FBI report, a chart per million members of the murderer's race. And it lists whites killed by blacks, 11.30. Whites killed by whites, 10.84. Blacks killed by whites, 0.95. Blacks killed by blacks, 57.14. You're welcome to take a look at this if you want. You don't want to believe what all you see on TV. You're going to have to dig in and see what you got. I also keep on my desk, in fact, I didn't even take the time to put a nice cover over it. This year will go down in history for the first time. A civilized nation has full gun registration, our streets will be safer, our police more efficient, and the world will follow our lead into the future. Adolf Hitler, 1935. The National Guard, as we know it, stands ready. And it's probably better equipped, better trained than we've ever been. My dad never paid attention to me when I was on the enlisted side. When I was leaving for Officer Candidate School at Fort Benning, he was in the hospital, because in that time they put you in the hospital to pull your teeth to get dentures. So he enlisted in the Army in 1940, come home in 1945. So he reached up, shook my hand. He says, "Kid, whatever unit you command, make it move in 20 minutes or less, or you're going to die." He says, "The next thing, when you train to that standard in peacetime, you will always be in trouble with your superiors." I did, and I was. And pretty much the reason my career come to a halt as a major. But I don't care. I believed in what I was doing. And I hope that every one of you, and I guess it's too late now, they've already gone, will walk out and shake hands with that National Guardsman out there. Because he is very important to your safety. One of the last briefings that I got before I retired was that the American populace, 97% was fed by 3%. Our birth rate capabilities was only operating at 10%. And if you took an M60 machine gun at the cyclic rate of fire was 550 rounds a minute, you could fire that from here to infinity. One bullet, one Chinaman. And they could still reproduce faster than we can kill them. Now you want to take a look at what's going on today. Because that information should scare the hell out of you. But again, what you have in your hip pocket is you got the National Guard. The regular Army cannot operate today without us. Between Clinton and the Obama administration, they've taken our force level down so low that we have to operate for at least a year before any replacements will come to aid us. "60 days ago, 2 months ago, I was in Alaska with my lady Cindy, who, by the way, is a Navy vet. It probably works out well because with that military mindset, it's the only way that females can handle me. You have a friend. She is also an amateur archaeologist, and she is a Navy aerographer. Now, I didn't know what an aerographer was until she set me straight. It's a weather person. And her job at Norfolk, Virginia, and she did pull a tour and row to Spain, was to find the cold spots in the Atlantic Ocean. You're nodding your head, you know why. Because in the cold spots is where the Russian subs would hide. And we needed to know that as far as the Naval Command. And she didn't think that was very important. And I went, really? So we're back to Alaska. As an aerographer, a weather, she's looking at the Wrangell Range and weather formation, telling me all the clouds, this and that. And I'm looking at where would I put my tanks and how would the artillery go? I'm still in that mode. And we were in a restaurant, a hotel restaurant, and the bartender says, "Oh, those 3 kids over there, they're Navy airplane repairmen." I mentally go, there's no water in Fairbanks, Alaska. But there is Eglison Air Force Base, which has the latest and greatest F-35 fighters. And my mind says, why are they there? unless that kid with the big box of crayons over here launching missiles, that we have sent a carrier task force up there. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But the world is a very dangerous place out there. I hope you support your Guard unit. I hope you encourage people to join the Guard unit. I hope you're able to tell people about it. And I hope I have told you more than you ever knew before. So, with that, thank you all for your service. I hope you take and pass down to your kids what your service did, because I still get asked, people come up to me and say, would you go talk to my dad? He won't talk to me. Well, that's probably because he saw some heavy-duty stuff and he doesn't want to talk about it. And I hope I've enriched their life, because there's stories that need to be told. With that, I'll say this to you, and then I'll open it up if you got any questions. Is may the good Lord smile upon you, and may you be in heaven days before the devil knows you're gone. And God bless America. If you got any questions, fire away. Okay, I'm done.
So we're getting ready to get started here. For those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Tammy Boylan, and I am the chairperson of this committee that planned today's event. So first of all, I would like to say, if any of our committee members are here, if you would please stand up. I think some of them, come on, Sandy, Abe. I'm only gonna call, okay, there we go, there's a few of you. Okay, well, if we could give them a round of applause. There are John. So I really appreciate all of their hard work. We have been able to meet for the last probably 6 or 7 months, which has been a wonderful thing to be able to get together and talk about this day. But before I turn it over to Colleen, I did want to remind all of you that we are taking pictures of the veterans by branch immediately following this. We are going to do it in one of our other rooms, so I just didn't want you to leave. We would love to have a photo of you. We have some little slips of paper that if you would like a photo mailed to you, we can do that, but you have to fill out the slip of paper so we know where to mail it to. So make sure you grab one of those or flag me down and I'll bring you one, and that way we can have that information. So thank you all for your service. It's been wonderful to be in your company today. And here's Colleen.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you to all you veterans that are here today with us. Happy Veterans Day. It is always an honor for us to be here to recognize veterans, whether it's here or anywhere. It's always a pleasure for us to be here. Thank you, Active Aging, for inviting us. Also, we are live on Channel 23. So thank you, veterans that are at home and unable to attend, and welcome to this presentation today. My name is Colleen Munn. I am the group leader for PA Stitchers of Valor. This is part of the group that you see in front of you. It is an honor, like I said, to be here. We will be recognizing 18 veterans today for their service. These veterans have been nominated by their family or friends to be a recipient of a quilt. The Quilts of Valor Foundation is a national organization. It was founded in 2003 by grassroots quilter Catherine Roberts. When her son was deployed in Iraq, a gunner sitting atop of a Humvee, she felt 10 seconds away from panic 24 hours a day. She dreamt one night of a post-deployed warrior battling the demons of war, was wrapped with a quilt, and wrapped himself with a quilt, and she saw the difference that that quilt made, and she equates quilts to healing. Since the Quilts of Valor began in 2003, over 286,000 Quilts of Valor have been awarded to veterans, service members across the United States, Germany, Afghanistan, and Iraq. The missions of Quilts of Valor is to cover servicemen and women and veterans touched by war with a comforting and healing Quilt of Valor. PA Stitchers of Valor got started in 2016 when I made my first Quilts of Valor for my niece and her husband upon their retirement from the United States Navy. After registering the quilts with the national organization, which all of these quilts do get registered with national, and they keep track of them, a veteran is only to receive one Quilt of Valor, because there's so many veterans out there that we want to recognize. We want to spread them around. But I registered my niece and her husband, and I was notified within 3 weeks for 3 veterans in this area if I could help them out. At the time, I was working a part-time job, a full-time job, and I didn't have a whole lot of time to make 3 quilts. But I asked her what's my time frame, and she said 6 months to a year. I still couldn't do that. I didn't feel comfortable doing that or committing to that. So I went to our quilt guild in Sagertown and talked to them and explained the program, explained the quilts, showed them pictures of my niece and nephew and their quilts, and we decided in 2017 to do that as a service project for our guild. In April of 2017, we joined the national organization, and in May of 2017, we awarded our first 11 Quilts of Valor. As of today, not counting the 18 that we are presenting, we have awarded 320 Quilts of Valor to local veterans. What that means is that we've honored 320 service members and veterans. I'm sorry, I don't usually get emotional, but that's a lot of quilts that we've made in 4 years. That's a lot of veterans that we've awarded, but there's so many of you out there that we haven't gotten to yet. And notice I have said these quilts are awarded. They are not charity quilts or something that we buy. Each one is handmade and crafted by volunteers. We work on the quilts individually or in groups. We meet once a month for a day of sewing. During those times, we talk about the veterans that we have awarded in the past, ones coming up, or we talk about our family and friends that have served or are serving. And that's when the tears sometimes and the laughter are sewn into the quilts. At this time, I would like to ask Chief Master Sergeant John Amato to come forward and introduce our recipients. When he calls your name, please come forward and bring a loved one with you and have a seat up front. We are going to start at that end to the middle, then that end to the middle. Okay? John? Okay, we'll do that.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here. Thank you. Our first candidate today is Specialist Frank C. Nieman, United States Army. Specialist Nieman was drafted in 1968 and served from 1968 to 1970. His MOS was 31 Mike 20, radio, repair, and relayer. He did his basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Specialist Nieman was drafted into the United States Army during the Vietnam War. Then he went to Germany and served in Vietnam from 69 to 70. He states that his cousin was the first to be killed in Vietnam from this area. He is a member of the American Legion in Linesville. Specialist Frank C. Nieman. Our second candidate, Sergeant Richard Glenn Mangus. Sergeant Mangus enlisted in the United States Air Force September 23, 1965, and served until March 1969. He was a supply computer operator. He went to boot camp at Lackland Air Force Base, San Antonio, Texas, and his advanced training was Amarillo Air Base in Amarillo, Texas. Sergeant Mangus was first stationed at Richards Gabar Air Force Base in Grandview, Missouri, and then he went back to Amarillo for advanced training. He was later shipped to Payne Field, Seattle, Washington, and from there he went to Phan Rang Air Base in Vietnam. Sergeant Mangus' father served in the Army Air Corps in the Philippines during World War II. When Sergeant Mangus graduated from high school, he wanted to join the Air Force in his father's footsteps, much to his mother's dismay. And to her further dismay, he volunteered to go to Vietnam. Sergeant Mangus, when asked if he had any other comments, spoke of his passion to always remember those who are prisoners of war and those who did not return. Sergeant Richard Glenn Mangus. Lance Corporal Sanford R. Porter. Lance Corporal Sanford R. Porter served in the United States Marine Corps from 1964 to 1967. He was a recon Marine and a radio operator. He did his basic training at Parris Island, South Carolina. Lance Corporal Porter enlisted in the United States Marine during Vietnam, and he served with the 1st Recon Battalion as a radio operator. He earned 2 Purple Hearts within a month's time. He's on the Through the Veterans Eye Board. He's the Vice President of the Heritage Association, Vice President of the French Creek Archaeology Society, and serves on the John Brown Association Board and formerly on the Conneaut Lake Historical Society Board. Lance Corporal Sanford R. Porter. Major Glenn Kennedy. Major Glenn Kennedy served in the United States Army Pennsylvania National Guard from 1964 to 1988. His MOS was 11B Infantry. He went to boot camp at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and advanced training in Fort Polk, Louisiana. Special classes he attended during his time in service was Officers Candidate School, the Advanced Course for Officers, and Mortar Platoon School at Fort Benning, Georgia. He was stationed with the 1st Battalion of the 112th Infantry of the 28th Division, Pennsylvania National Guard, at that time located in Erie, Pennsylvania. Major Glenn Kennedy. Specialist Joshua P. Kruger. I know that guy. I think I had him in school. Specialist Joshua P. Kruger served in the United States Army from 2007 to 2014. His MOS was Air Defense Artillery. He went to basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Specialist Kruger enlisted into the United States Army during freedom, and he was the Air Defense C-4 operator setting radars and maintenance on the equipment. He joined the United States Army after his junior year and did his basic training over the summer and came back to finish his high school. He served in South Korea for 1 year, Afghanistan for 1 year, and he's a member of the Linesville VFW. Specialist Joshua P. Kruger. Lance Corporal Boyd A. Sullivan. Lance Corporal Boyd A. Sullivan served in the United States Marine Corps from 1990 to 1994. His MOS was 0311 Rifleman. He went to basic training at Parris Island, South Carolina, and advanced training at Camp Geiger and Security Forces School in Chesapeake, Virginia. Lance Corporal Sullivan enlisted into the United States Marine Corps during Desert Storm. He states that his greatest accomplishment is being a grandpa by 19 months. He coached Little League, Senior League, and high school baseball and Little Gritters football. He's a member of VFW Post 169, Venango and American Legion, Cambridge Springs. Lance Corporal Boyd A. Sullivan. Senior Master Sergeant Robert Leroy Mitchell.
He's coming. Come right here. This way.
Senior Master Sergeant Robert Leroy Mitchell served in the United States Air Force from 1955 to 1975 and achieved the rank of Senior Master Sergeant. His MOS was supply. His basic training was at Sampson Air Force Base, New York. He might have been with my dad. That's about when he was there. And he was stationed in Okinawa, Japan. Senior Master Sergeant Mitchell enlisted in the United States Air Force during the Vietnam War. He was stationed in Okinawa, Japan. As a support to those in Vietnam, he did several tours of duty. He's a member of the American Legion, Blue Lodge Masons member on the council at his church, and was part of the Cambridge Community Theater Group. 2 of his sons are being recognized today as well. Senior Master Sergeant Robert Leroy Mitchell. Senior Chief Scott Allen Mitchell. Senior Chief Scott Allen Mitchell served in the United States Navy from 1985 to 2005 as an engineerman. He went to basic training at Great Lakes Naval Station, Chicago, and was stationed in Santiago, California for sea duty, Great Lakes, Chicago for shore duty. Senior Chief Mitchell enlisted in the United States Navy during Desert Storm, and he served on 6 deployments. He was a past member of the Cambridge Springs Masonic Lodge. He's a member of Venango VFW Post 169 and was a school bus driver. He is the son of Senior Master Sergeant Robert Mitchell and has 2 sons that have served as well. Senior Chief Scott Allen Mitchell.
No favoritism.
No favoritism.
Staff Sergeant Michael Clinton Mitchell. Staff Sergeant Michael Clinton Mitchell served in the United States Army and Army Reserves from 2001 and still currently serves. He's a mechanic. He went to basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Staff Sergeant Mitchell enlisted in the United States Army and is currently serving with the United States Army Reserve. He's a mechanic and worked on Humvees, but shifted around with different equipment. He's done 1 tour in Afghanistan and 2 tours in Iraq. He is the son of Master Sergeant Robert Leroy Mitchell. He too is with the Cambridge Springs Masons. Staff Sergeant Michael Clinton Mitchell. Sergeant Gail W. Henderson. Sergeant Gail W. Henderson served in the United States Air Force from 1968 to 1972. He went to basic training at Lackland Air Force Base, Texas. His MOS was electrician. He was stationed in Charleston Air Force Base in South Carolina, the Panama Canal, and Fort Lee, Virginia. Sergeant Henderson enlisted in the United States Army Air Force, or United States Air Force, during the Vietnam War. And he was an appliance repairman, and once recovered a woman's diamond ring out of her dryer. He's a member of the American Legion in VFW at Titusville. He is a caregiver for his girlfriend, Sergeant Gail W. Henderson. Sergeant Paul E. Peterson. Sergeant Paul E. Peterson served in the United States Marine Corps from 1966 to 1970. His basic training was at Santiago, California. Sergeant Peterson enlisted in the United States Marines during Vietnam. He served 13 months in Vietnam in an ammo tech dump and in the brig with prisoners. He qualified as an expert marksman. He's a member of the Marine Corps League from 1984 to 2016. He is a member of the American Legion, Post 836, Cochrane. He is also involved in the Cochrane Lions Club from 1983 to 2016 when it disbanded. He is a member of the Sportsman Club and the Christian Missionary Alliance Church and has coached girls softball for several years. Sergeant Paul E. Peterson. Specialist Ken Culbertson. Specialist Ken Culbertson served in the United States Army from 1964 to 1966. He was a cook. He did his basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, his AIT at Fort Lewis, Washington, near Seattle, Tacoma. After completing AIT, Specialist Culbertson was shipped to Quai Non, a coastal port city in the Binh Dinh province, Vietnam, where he spent 1 year. When asked if he had any special stories to tell, he said, "None that I can tell in public. I just did my job and came home." And P.S., he says he doesn't cook. Upon returning home, Specialist Culbertson began to work in the construction industry. He started as a laborer and then became an operating engineer out of local number 66, from which he retired. Specialist Ken Culbertson. Private First Class Gerald R. Hart. Private First Class Gerald R. Hart served in the United States Army from 1954 to 1956. He was a wheeled vehicle mechanic. He went to boot camp at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, and his advanced training was at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Private Hart was stationed at Fort Shafter in Oahu, Hawaii, with the U.S. Army's 25th Division. Then he returned from deployment in Korea and was in charge of all vehicles in that division. He was discharged from Fort Sheridan, Illinois. During a training exercise, Specialist Hart was asked to shoot a bazooka. He told the officer he could not shoot it as he was blind in the right eye since the age of 8. The ranking officer was amazed and wanted to know how in the world he got there. After being discharged, Private Hart worked in the construction industry. Private First Class Gerald R. Hart. Specialist April Dennis.
There's my cousin.
Specialist April Dennis served in the United States Army Reserves from 1980 to 1992 with 3 different MOSs: Supply Specialist, Medical Supply Specialist, and Combat Medic. She went to boot camp at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and AIT the first time at Fort Jackson and the second time at Fort Meade, Maryland. She's with the 382nd MASH Unit in Erie, PA, and the 403rd CONUS Replacement Unit, Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. Specialist Dennis was activated for 6 months during Desert Storm to Fort Benning, Georgia, where she served with the 403rd CONUS, receiving and processing military personnel deploying from Saudi Arabia. Specialist Dennis worked for Zurn Industries while in the reserves. After getting married, she was a stay-home mom and raised 3 sons, 2 of which are veterans. As a special note, both Specialist Dennis and Sergeant John Dennis came from a long line of military service. Grandparents served in World War II, and an uncle who was killed at the Po River Valley in Italy. Both have fathers, brothers, sons, and nephews who served and are serving our country. Specialist April Dennis. Sergeant John Dennis. He's there. All right. Sergeant Dennis served from 1984 to 1988. First 2 months were in the PA National Guard, then he re-enlisted for 4 more years and then finished in 1992. Sergeant Dennis was a 12 Bravo combat engineer. In combat situations, they provided their expertise in areas such as mobility, counter-mobility, survivability, and general engineering, which means constructing bridges, clearing barriers and explosives, and detecting and avoiding mines and other hazards. His boot camp was in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, as was his advanced training. He went to Airborne School at Fort Benning, Georgia, Ranger School and Non-Commissioned Officer School at Fort Drum, New York, Air Assault School as well at Fort Drum. I goofed that up, I'm sorry. Fort Benning was Airborne School and Ranger School and the NCO School, and Fort Drum is where he went to Air Assault School and Nuclear, Biological, and Chemical School. He was stationed at Fort Devens, Massachusetts, Eschborn, Germany, and Fort Drum, New York. After his discharge in 1992, Sergeant Dennis joined the PA State Police. He was assigned to the Mercer Unit for 3 years and then the Meadville Unit for 17 years. Sergeant Dennis presently works for the Crawford County Sheriff's Office. Sergeant John Dennis. Specialist 5th Class, Catherine E. Collier. Spec 5 Collier served in the Woman Army Corps WAC from 1961 to 1964. Her basic training was at Fort McClellan, Anniston, Alabama. Her advanced training was also there for administrative work, secretary for 6 weeks, finishing in the top of her class. Spec 5 Collier was stationed in Fort Myers in Virginia by the Pentagon and across from Arlington Cemetery. She worked for the Signal Corps there until she transferred to New Orleans, France, and still worked for the Signal Corps in the Orleans Area Command. She's a member of the American Legion and VFW Post 2006, both in Meadville and Bethany Methodist Church. Spec 5, Catherine E. Collier. Private First Class Raymond Myers. Private First Class Raymond Myers served in the United States Marine Corps from 1956 to 1958. He was stationed in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. He completed his infantry training there as well. After Mr. Myers' discharge, he worked for the Bessemer Railroad as a clerk in the diesel shop, and he's married to Gladys Myers. Private First Class Raymond Myers. This one's a little touchy for me because this guy was my commander in my unit. And then on top of that, I ended up getting a free trip to Kyrgyzstan and Iraq with him. So, Major Robert Goldenberg.
You're staying up here, right?
Yep. Major Robert Goldenberg served in the United States Air Force and the United States Air Force Reserves. His years of service were 1986 to 2010. After high school, he enlisted in the United States Air Force and was stationed at Griffiths Air Force Base, New York for 4 years. At the completion of his enlistment, he enlisted in the United States Air Force Reserves and was later commissioned. He was activated and served 1 tour in Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan and 2 tours in Iraq, 1 at Baghdad and another in a forward operating base at El-Assad. He retired as the commander of the 2010 as the commander of the 76th Airport Squadron. And I got to tell you, he makes great coffee, and he kept me out of trouble a lot when I was with him. All right? He and his wife, Michelle, have 2 daughters, Allison and Lindsay. Major Robert Goldenberg.
You said you kept me out of trouble.
Here. Here, Joe. Thank you, John, for doing the introductions. Before we award the quilts to the veterans today, I'd like to explain to you the significance of the quilt to the veteran, and I am going to ask Wanda to come and help me. She's going to be my Vanna today. Don't hit the guy in the face.
He knows how to duck.
Each quilt is made of 3 layers, and each layer has a meaning to us. The top of the quilt, with its many colors, shapes, fabric, represents the community and the many individuals that are in it. The batting, or the filling of the quilt, it represents the hope that the quilt will bring warmth, comfort, peace, and love to the recipient. That's my place. The back is the strength of the quilt. It supports all the other layers. It represents the strength of the recipient, the support of his or her family, the communities, and our nation. Each stitch, which is hard to see on the sample, but as you get closer to the quilts that have been awarded today, you'll see the different stitching that's on them. That represents the love, gratitude, and often the tears of the maker. It brings a 3-part message from our hearts. First, we honor you for your service. We honor you for leaving all that you hold dear, whether in a time of crisis or in a time of peace. Second, the quilters know that freedom is not free. The cost is the dedication of lives of men and women like you. And the quilt is meant to say thank you for your service and sacrifice. Third, and finally, this quilt is meant to offer comfort and to remind you that although your family and friends cannot be with you at all times, you are always in our thoughts and prayers. At this time, each veteran will be wrapped with what is called a quilter's hug. We will do this as a group. Quilts of Valor are not given to you like a book or a magazine, but with a hug. That is a quilter on one side and the family or friend on the other side of the quilt. You will take the quilt and wrap it around their shoulders.
This is Robert.
I know, but
Okay, right now, too. We're both.
the reason for the quilting hug is so that if you're ever feeling alone or battling the demons of war, or just having a bad day. You can wrap the quilt around yourself and feel the hug that you just received, and remember that you are not alone. You have the love, support, and gratitude of all of us, family, friends, quilters, community, and nation. On behalf of PA Stitchers of Valor and the entire Quilts of Valor family and our grateful nation, with our deepest appreciation, we thank you for your service to our country. Each Quilt of Valor comes with a presentation case and or a pillowcase and a certificate. Ladies, those are under your chair. Please get them out and give them to your veterans. Or John. The certificate states, the Quilts of Valor Foundation wishes to recognize you for your service to our nation. We consider it our privilege to do so. Though we may never know the extent of your sacrifice to protect and defend the United States of America, we award you this Quilt of Valor as an expression of our gratitude from a grateful nation. It has been an honor for us to be here today, for each one of us to be here today. We thank you, veterans, for your service. Happy Veterans Day. If you are a Vietnam veteran or any other veteran, welcome home. Thank you, Active Aging, for putting this program together for our veterans. You always do an awesome job. Thank you, too, for inviting us to be a part. That concludes our part of the presentation, our award ceremony today. Make sure you thank your veterans today for their service. Thank you.